So we take it now from here, and I would hand it over to Steve Luck. He's our microphone guy. He's a very athletic person who can really cover the whole room, and he will carry the microphone to you for questions, comments, input. Yes, please. Yes. And have one or the other provocative question, Steve, to make this really lively. Don't hold back, please.
Well, the organizations that I mentioned in particular are typically focused in and around academia, and primarily only academia. And as we all know, as PhDs or even masters in chemistry, science, engineering, whatever, only a very small percentage actually pursue and go into academia. I think it's something like 7 or 17% of PhDs stay in academia and find faculty positions. So the fact that you're coming at the diversity and the retainment of women in these fields, but from the industrial side, I think will definitely set you apart. And I think if you can find a way to reach out to academic institutions and let them know that industry also cares in addition to the academic groups that already exist, then perhaps you could all work together instead of maybe trying to compete with each other.
That's definitely what we don't want to, because we heard that already in the last 2 days here. That's interesting. No, that's not our interest. I think that could be supplemental and really be very, very helpful. And you just mentioned also that not a lot of people are pursuing a further career, and I also heard about a few obstacles hindering a lot of women who would love to do that. And somebody mentioned daycare, for example, these kind of things, which in other countries are taken care of, like Denmark, for example, where you have a different ratio than of females in the higher echelons. So perhaps that's something also we could take on and either provide ourselves help with or address it to the corresponding political parties that need to know about it in a different fashion than it was addressed earlier on. I don't know, Lauren, what do you want to add to that?
I mean, I guess I'm coming from the academic perspective, so that's why we're teaming up. But at the same time, even though there are all of these organizations, there's still a problem, right? So there's still a need that needs to be addressed. And I think that in this case, maybe...
I have a few comments, I guess, since you're asking. Hi, my name's Olga Michaels. I am a professor at a small liberal arts college in the Midwest at Luther College. I have a few comments, I guess, since you're asking. Teach a course called Women in Science, have for many years. So through that, academically, I think I've read lots of articles, and a lot of what you're talking about and what you just said, I would point to, I think, one of the biggest things I've found in the U.S., if we're talking about the U.S., I mean, 12 weeks of maternity care, of protected job, a lot of places like no maternity leave. People who want to have a family, I mean, they look for a job that'll fit. The tenure time clock, the pressures of academia, so I'm an academic, those don't fit. And people look at that and they just, there's no way. So I think that's a big obstacle. Another big obstacle for women in science is that, and I'm seeing this, having stepkids in a rural school, their middle school teachers hate science. Their middle school teachers teach them to hate science and that girls can't do science. And I don't know how we overcome that. That's a huge barrier. Until we can overcome those kind of big obstacles, we're not going to see those percentages rise, I don't think. So a lot of us are fighting to overcome those things, but when you think about what to do about that, I think those are areas you need to target. So we need to target science education at the middle school level. That's where we scare off a lot of women. I know we have 50-50 in the undergraduate level, but a lot of them are coming in already with thoughts about not moving on. Like they're going to do their undergrad to be a doctor or a dentist or a pharmacist or whatever. And if that doesn't pan out, then they're going to go teach or they're going to do something else. So, and that mentality, I think, has started really early. So when some people always ask about that 50% undergrad, I think that's a little bit of a deception. It's not like a lot of them are thinking about, the pipeline, about the top tier jobs. They're not. medicine. In medicine, we're seeing a lot closer to equality because they have a lot of applicants, and that's what a lot of my undergrads are aiming for. So I think the link to industry is great as an academic when my students are like, I'd love an internship in industry. I have no idea how to help them. So I could use that help. I've been an academic for 14 years, and I've been saying, I'll write you letters, I can make phone calls, but I have no link, I have no background. So I appreciate that aspect.
Thanks. Thanks, Olga. Yeah? How you doing?
My question is it for like just the United States or it's an international organization?
So currently we are just in the U.S. Because we have to start limited, and we thought, as I said before, we see in the U.S. a need currently where we are living and working. But as soon as we started this on social media, we also got input from other countries which would love to take part in it, as well as sponsors, which really surprised us and overwhelmed us to a certain degree. So it doesn't mean that we limit it forever. So it's a very interesting question. And I also had some people from countries here on the show floor yesterday mentioning that they would love to see programs like that in their countries as well.
I just learned that the University of Puerto Rico has 56% women in science.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
interesting. And I know we have a professor from Puerto Rico over there. Do you want to comment on that, please?
Hi, I'm Vilmali Lopez Mejias.
Hi.
I am a professor of chemistry in the Department of Chemistry at the University of Puerto Rico, Rio Piedras. Yes, we have a lot of women in our undergrads, but I share the sentiment of the previous speaker that said that basically they're focusing on somewhere else up in the pipeline. They're not focusing on going to grad school, maybe MD or PharmD, but not what we're doing, not what we are, all trained for here. So I think that giving opportunities for them to explore other career paths, not only academia, but also industrial jobs where women in science are particularly needed, it would be a good step forward for this organization. I also think that we need more success stories because that's not normally highlighted in the press, or even when you get an award as prestigious as a Nobel Prize. Mm-hmm. It's not as popular, let's say. So maybe that's my input.
Yeah, thank you.
That's exactly what we would love to see, share success stories. That's great. Steve over there is...
Surely. Yeah, one second. Come right back. Yeah.
I'm a grad student at Georgetown University, so I'm actually local. I really appreciate these other perspectives too, so I guess I'm kind of speaking as being a student in grad school currently, and so I think that is an excellent point that, there aren't enough women going into grad school in chemistry, among other things. You, Lauren, were able to speak to having these strong female mentors, right? And those being really influential to your success. And one thing that I reflect on, and I volunteer with the local ACS chapter, is that not all of us have that, whether we're in middle school or grade school or even our undergrad or as a grad student. We often have, I guess, leaders who say that they're all about women in science, but there's no action. So I guess that's something I would love to see.
Thanks for sharing.
My name is Gunda Georg. I'm department head in the Department of Medicinal Chemistry at the University of Minnesota. And so I applaud what you're doing. I would like to know a little bit more about the investment of industry. You spoke about that briefly, but I wasn't quite clear on how many organizations are behind it, how many different industries, what kind of industries, and if you could maybe elaborate a little bit on that, that would be great. And I think it's a fantastic idea to provide these internships, even for undergraduates, but also for graduate students, to go into the industry and see and feel it out. And often that's not easy to do because we cannot pay from our NIH grants a student to spend 3 months in the summer in industry. And so there are few companies that are doing that already, but there are not that many. And so my second question is, what do you think, what's sort of the scope of what you are planning? How many fellowships or internships will you be able to offer, maybe in year one?
Yes, thank you. That's an interesting question, Gunda. Thank you very much. And which kind of industries are behind it? I can give you a few ideas about that. About the names, I have to be a little bit careful right now because I have to tell you that we are a non-profit organization waiting for the certification by the IRS to be a 501c3 certified company. Takes longer than we all were hoping for. I don't want to blame them, but we were hoping to get it already whilst we are here. So therefore, some of the companies backing us said we have to wait until this happens. One name that I can mention here is the company Sartorius, which a lot of people of you know. So the industries behind us are either companies from the laboratory instrument manufacturers like ourselves that we are coming from, Ralph and myself, and the ones that we know, of course, very well as chemical and pharmaceutical companies, as well as also companies in the US who are using this equipment in their laboratories, and by this means intend also to get in touch with young scientists, which could help them driving their startup companies. And I can also share with you, and you have seen that perhaps some of you on our social media, that specifically is true for the cannabis-related industry right now. So we have a lot of interest from them as well as in sponsoring that. That for us was very surprising. So I cannot give you a full list right now of the names. As I said, we are waiting every day for this 501c3 certification, but then we can do that. How many grants and internships we are giving away in the first year? We had to provide to the IRS a business plan, so we hope that we will this year be in the range of $100,000, but we are just starting this, so with your help, please talk to everybody who is able to provide more, and we would love to share that with you as soon as we can.
Hello, I'm Elke Schoffers. I'm at Western Michigan University. I'm a full professor there. It's very nice to see people turn out for this event, and I think it's a very worthwhile pursuit to address a real problem. Things have improved over time. I think my main curiosity is about what kind of activities do you envision in the future. While we see predominantly women here, it's also important to have men support the women. And actually, women can be, not every woman is supportive of another woman, for example. So there can be very strong male, feminine skills, and how it is a barrier to really becoming more effective in setting goals professionally and personally. Are you thinking about developing some best practices, also integrating possibly men into programs? Because if you say we'll have funding for women to do X, then there can be a backlash. So I'm just wondering how far you've gotten with that kind of discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for these questions. With the last part of your question, we have not gotten very far. We were discussing it internally, that this backlash might happen. Talking about males supporting females in science or elsewhere, I can perhaps share a little bit my personal story here. We were also talking earlier about the problems with maternity. So my wife is sitting here in the second row, Petra. She's a scientist herself. So she had to stop her PhD work when our baby was born. Our baby is 23 right now and also in Washington. But so we have a very personal story that made me think about what today should be and could be different than at the time in 1994. So therefore, I think I totally understand where you are coming from. The other part of the question that we are mentioning, what was it again, the beginning? Sorry for asking again.
Communication, I think.
Communication, exactly. That's my favorite, honestly. So why did I forget this? Because
Yeah, you love communication.
yes, Steve knows that because I, in my past, before I came to the lab industry, I was in the pharmaceutical industry and was a communications trainer, in fact, in the company called Novartis. And since then, I've developed a lot of programs around communication, from oral communication, written communication, but also body language as well as micro expressions. So that's something that we think we train our people, our staff, very much in depth. And that's something I thought about also to share with others, because that would help you in interacting with your colleagues, with your bosses, with your students, you name it, as well as in interviews to get the position that you are looking for. These are things which doesn't cost us a lot. We would love to share that by face-to-face trainings as well as virtual trainings. These are things that we can provide, and we definitely have the expertise and the contacts necessary to do so. If I cannot do that on my own, all of that. But that's really communication really is key. I'm with you. And that's one of the reasons why we have this kind of informal platform here. That's also informal communication, which really drives then formal communication afterwards, because we want to get output after we analyzed all the notes that Leah has taken and really drive that forward. So communication is key, and I think we in the industry know a lot about this because that's our daily business. Otherwise, we cannot sustain. And we would love to share that with all of you. And I'm very passionate about that specifically. So.
I'll just add one other thing from my personal experience. So I have a somewhat unusual background as a chemist, and then undergrad I actually went to business school, and I definitely, it was a little bit uncomfortable at first because, of course, in the courses there's a lot of team activities. There is imbalance, definitely more men in the courses than women. Men tend to be louder, they communicate differently. You know, there's been all sorts of research on negotiation styles are different and things like this. And I got to learn all of that in my business school classes, and I wasn't really aware of it before. And then I decided to go into science, and I do think that coming from more of an industry, business-oriented background, there are a lot of things that we, as scientists, perhaps in academia or as students, we're never exposed to. And I think that through that interaction and communication, we can help women to better support themselves and communicate and I'm not sure what the word I'm looking for, voice their opinions and negotiate better for themselves and things like that.
May I have a follow-up question?
Yes, please.
One thing that is also prevalent in society throughout is this division. Have you thought about activities for integration? I mean, we clearly, when we have a diverse pool of talent, we all benefit. And about educating the science community about this. I think industry has for a long time been far ahead of academia when it comes to diversity and being supportive of women. So do you have any plans for that aspect, for integration, for common ground, pulling people together?
We would love to do that, but we have no concrete plan for that right now, and that was one of the reasons to establish this meeting here. Therefore, that's very valuable input, and whoever can comment on that, how we could achieve that, that's very, very welcome, because we need this. As I said, we don't have all the answers to all your questions. We need these questions to really come up then with a solution all together. This is a platform to communicate. That's very helpful input.
Who's next? Yeah.
Hello, my name is Catherine. I'm currently a chemical engineering undergraduate student at a community college in Northern Maryland. Obviously, the goal is to help and empower every woman in science as a whole. However, it's hard when you're just tackling women as a whole. Like, are you taking into any other traits into consideration, like socioeconomic statuses, obviously race, and just because one of the options, or one of the factors that forced me to take the community college route was socioeconomic factors. Another thing I have a question about is, the goal is to have undergrad students pursue a graduate a graduate education and even further beyond as far as they can go. But don't you think you're limiting your pool of women that you're targeting, because in essence you're starting in a later part in life when the goal should be as young as you can, trying to get everyone, because by the time you get to undergraduate you have such already a small selection, and it just keeps getting further smaller and smaller and smaller.
So clearly, as many people have mentioned today, there are problems that start much earlier than college. When you're little kids and your parents are encouraging you, they should suggest that science is awesome, and they should encourage you to do that. Of course, there are problems, and I hope they're addressed, and I hope that somebody can address them. At the same time, I think we can't do everything, so we have to do the best we can with the resources that are available to us. Instead of doing a lot of things poorly, maybe we can do a few things really well, and try to solve the problems that we think are within our reach to address. So I agree that there are definitely bigger, broader issues, but maybe little by little, if we start where we can and we improve it, maybe it'll have a bigger effect elsewhere as well.
And I definitely agree with that. And we heard that a lot of times right now that we should start with kids, and you mentioned that also regarding your own childhood, and I 100% agree with that. But I'm also with Lauren that we have to focus ourselves on what we really can influence. And as I said, as we are from the industry and think we are therefore different with wisdom, you also have to take into consideration why industry also might be interested to do that when we are trying to onboard other sponsors. They have a more short-sighted view, unfortunately, but at least we can help here. Because some of the sponsors I know or mentioned even are listed on Wall Street. They are really quarterly driven. So they want people who are not kids right now. They want people who they think help them in the companies later to be better educated and to help them drive results in a few years' time instead of in 20 years. That's, I think, a huge difference. So this question of influencing kids, kindergarten or school age, that's probably something that political parties and communities can better address than we as industry. But I totally agree with your points. So
some of these people might be parents, I don't know, in a couple of years too. So at least you brought it up. Thanks. Yeah.
Speaking about being parents, I'm Victoria Volkis, professor in the University of Maryland Eastern Shore. I believe it's for men and for women evenly. Life is a balance of sacrificing something to achieve something. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you have to sacrifice more, sometimes you may have an option to sacrifice less. I do not think it's a normal situation that having family and giving birth, stopping woman from doing anything else she's dreaming. And I believe one of the problems here is that woman is not presented with enough possibilities, options of what to do, and not with enough examples of what has been done and that's what has been achieved. I know a lot of scientists in Germany, my colleagues, that by choice decided not to have kids, and that was a sacrificing to have an academic career. I do not think it's the right decision, because one day we will become old, not having kids. I'm getting old right now. Now here is my example. When I had my candidacy exam for PhD, I was 8 months pregnant with a second child. 2 years after that, I graduated with my PhD. How it was achieved? Yes, I had a very supportive family, but the place where I was living was also very, very supportive by providing plenty of options of child care, plenty of support to me. And when I immigrated to the United States, that was 11 years ago, and I look at the situation of younger women here, I do not see that many options which are not private and not extremely expensive. And I believe as an organization we can push and promote that side of it. On the other hand, women in similar situation can support women. And as an example, when I was doing PhD, having a second child, we, for example, when kids were sick or kindergarten was closed, we group together, and every day of the week, the other woman take 5 kids home and take care, so for other women can go and do their job and PhD project. And if every day other woman does it, so together, you do not go that much behind. And it can be achieved even without any governmental support, monetary support, or anything else. So that's a possibility that I bet now nobody thought about it. And it's an example of what I say, present woman with what can be done. Show her some example of somebody who did it and succeeds. And then let her decide how much she will sacrifice and how much she wants to achieve. Because still life is about balance.
Wow, that was a very nice input. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you think that was all Victoria got? We were talking to her earlier. That's the tip of the iceberg. Thank you for sharing. Are there some?
Hi, I'm Rhonda. I'm a chemist with U.S. Silica. Anyway, I was fortunate to have some strong mentors in college, a manager right now who is very supportive of education of both the men and the women at our workplace. But the one thing I did encounter in college, I was one of the oddballs. I knew I wanted to go into industry, but yet I had a professor, my own advisor, look at me and say, basically call me an idiot for not wanting to go to graduate school. So I think there is a need too, at both the high school and college level, that if you're going to promote industry and just do that, is make sure you make everyone aware of the opportunities that there are in industry that don't necessarily need a graduate degree. Because you still need your technicians, you still need your chemists. There's still a lot you can learn on the ground in industry that you can never learn in a classroom. I have learned so much in the past 7 years since I've gotten out of school that I never would have seen that had I gone on to graduate school. So in that case, I've been very fortunate and I'm very grateful. But there's also that stigma too, where you cannot succeed if you don't get an advanced degree beyond a bachelor's. And that was just something that I encountered and I had to fight. And I was lucky enough to have the mentors who said, hey, you want to be in industry, you don't want to go to grad school, but you know what you want, go for it.
Do you want to say
Sure,
something?
I'll say something.
Me too.
So I think this is definitely a problem in academia, and now that I'm in the role as an advisor and trying to talk to my students about what do you want to do and what are you passionate about? Do you want to go to grad school or do you not? Or what's your goal, go into industry or academia? Of course, I was brought up in an environment very similar to what you're describing, where most students did not have opportunities to do internship in industry. Once you went to grad school, all your summers were spent in grad school research. If you had an interest in industry, it was very hard to find an internship or an opportunity to even know if you would like it. There just wasn't those opportunities, and even if there were the opportunities, the faculty that are there have this bias that you should go to grad school, therefore I'm not going to encourage you to take these opportunities even if they exist. So I think that is a problem. I am personally trying to encourage my own students to explore more opportunities, even those that I personally didn't have the option to have. And I think that's a cultural shift that needs to happen in schools, both at the undergraduate and graduate level. I think if we advertise more opportunities, both for undergraduates and graduate students who are interested in going into industry, give them more opportunities to learn what it's like, learn what you can do. I mean, I'm still learning. I'm learning from them. I don't actually have firsthand experience. So I think it's about the communication, making folks aware of the different opportunities and encouraging them to explore these different avenues so that they at least know what their different options are.
Yes, I totally agree, and you are right that one could really learn a lot in industry, and I didn't think that is possible myself, honestly, when I was in university and postdoc, and so when I then went into industry, I really learned a lot, and later on thought, why are there these silos? And these are more prominent in Europe than in the US, I think. But we want to achieve with this kind of program as well that we talk to each other better, that these silos between academia and industry do not carry on to exist as much. Hopefully it's also possible that you learn something in industry and still have a way or possibility to move back into academia, which currently doesn't seem to be open like that. But that would be ideal, I would think, if there would be a free-floating opportunity between the two entities. That would really help both sides, I think, a lot. And with this kind of activities, we start something, and I know it's only a starting point, but it can grow and should grow with your help.
Hello, my name is Veslin Dobrev. I'm from Georgetown University. Hopefully, a few months I'll be a PhD, but I think we're all tiptoeing or talking about the same issues, and as much as I think we need to support women in science, I think the problem is not the women in the science, although I definitely think some women can hinder others, just like some men can hinder others. Whether that is because you see yourself, like, maybe male role models and male PIs see more of themselves in their male students and vice versa. But I think the major problem I think that we all have is that I think both men in academia as well as in industry need some sort of sensitivity training to some extent. And that's not to say we need to make excuses for this situation, be it pregnancy or childcare or whatever, but more so just be aware of your own biases. Because I come from an Eastern European country, I'm Bulgarian, and as funny as it is, people have all these anecdotes how horrible drivers women are, but when they see a woman doctor, they're like, oh my God, I want her to treat me. And it's just the most strangest thing where the culture is just very strange to me. And I've lived here a long time now, so when I go back home, I just don't get it. And I think that's something that being here, being around peers and just kind of immersing myself in the situation, and understanding that there is no necessarily issue of sex or cultural orientation, sexual orientation, whatever it is, it's more of being aware of the other. So I think one thing that people might be useful that the organization might provide is maybe some sort of seminar or something like that where just like we're here discussing, similarly you can have heads of department or heads of departments, industry, academia, culture, just discuss what they've experienced with dealing with students or what they've experienced, their own bias to be towards certain students. I mean, I can say for myself, sometimes I see, certain mentors in our department, my undergrad, that would definitely identify with a female or male student just because of similarities in their backgrounds or whatever it is. And as a person being on the outside, you're like, oh, that doesn't feel good. And I can definitely see that happening more with female students just because there's not, as you were saying, not that many, even though you had role models that, Lauren, you had role models that were females in your career, that's not very common. For me, ironically, my role model in undergrad was a female professor, and I thought she was just wonderful, but I didn't see her as a female professor, just saw her as an inspiring person. But a lot of my classmates thought it was strange. And they're like, well, why do you look up so much to her? Because I like her science. I think she's a very smart person. It had nothing to do with gender for me. But for a lot of the male students, I think there's also resistance to looking up to a female model because there's, I guess, some internal bias or internal apprehension. So with that, I think some seminar just discussing within the male community about how we treat, just in general, the other person that is not male or is not conforming to our idea of what one should be is, I think, important. I think that goes across gender borders and things like that, as well as cultural.
Thank you very much.